The bullet shattered the lantern hanging from the saloon's porch beam, and Zara Connelly knew she had exactly 3 seconds to decide whether to run or fight. She chose neither, dropping to the muddy street and rolling beneath the water trough as 2 more shots rang out above her head. The year was 1877, and Watsonville, California, was experiencing what the locals called growing pains, which was a polite way of saying the lawless element had decided to make the coastal town their new playground. Zara pressed her face against the cold ground, her traveling bag still clutched in one hand, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had arrived on the afternoon stage from San Francisco with plans to meet her cousin Margaret, who supposedly ran a boarding house on the edge of town. What she had found instead was a main street emptying faster than water through a sieve, as gunfire erupted from somewhere near the general store. The stagecoach driver had dumped her trunk on the boardwalk and disappeared before she could even ask for directions. Now she was soaked, covered in mud, and seriously reconsidering every decision that had led her to leave her position as a seamstress in the city. The shooting stopped as suddenly as it had started, replaced by the sound of horses galloping away and nervous voices emerging from doorways. Zara waited another moment before crawling out from under the trough, her dark green traveling dress now thoroughly ruined. "You hurt, miss." A deep voice came from above her, and she looked up to find a man extending his hand toward her. He was tall, probably close to 6 feet, with sandy brown hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of creek water in summer. His face was weathered but young, maybe 25 or 26, and he wore the dusty clothes of a working cowboy, chaps, worn leather vest over a blue shirt, and a hat that had seen better days. "I am fine, thank you," Zara said, accepting his hand and allowing him to pull her to her feet. She was 23 herself, old enough to recognize the genuine concern in his expression. "Does this happen often?" "More than it should," he admitted, picking up her bag from where it had fallen and handing it to her. "The Carson brothers have been causing trouble for weeks now. Sheriff is doing what he can, but it is only him and 1 deputy for the whole town." He paused, looking her over with what seemed like professional assessment rather than improper interest. "You just arrive. On the 4 o'clock stage. I am looking for Margaret Connelly's boarding house." "She is my cousin." Something shifted in the man's expression, a flash of discomfort that made Zara's stomach drop. "I am afraid I have some bad news about that, miss. Margaret Connelly passed away about 2 months back. Fever took her real sudden-like. I am sorry." The world seemed to tilt sideways. Zara had been exchanging letters with Margaret for months, making plans, building a future in her mind where she would help run the boarding house and maybe save enough money to open her own dressmaking shop. Margaret had been her mother's cousin, the only family Zara had left after her parents died in a fire 3 years ago, and now she was gone too. "I see," Zara heard herself say, though her voice sounded like it was coming from somewhere far away. "The boarding house. Property went to some creditors. It is a saloon now." The cowboy was watching her carefully as if concerned she might faint. "You got anywhere else to go? Anyone expecting you?" "No." The word came out smaller than she intended. She had spent every dollar she had saved on the stage ticket and brought her entire life with her in 1 trunk and 1 bag. "No, there is no one else." The cowboy removed his hat, running a hand through his hair in a gesture that suggested he was thinking hard about something. "My name is Kieran Turner. I work at the Double R Ranch about 5 miles north of here, but I keep a room above the livery stable when I am in town. It is not much, but at least it has a roof and a door that locks. You could stay there tonight while you figure out what to do next." Zara knew she should probably be scandalized by the suggestion. should definitely be more cautious about accepting help from a complete stranger. But the alternative was sleeping in the street, and something about Kieran Turner's straightforward manner made her think he was genuinely trying to help rather than take advantage. "That is very kind of you, Mr. Turner. I would appreciate that, at least for tonight." "Kieran is fine," he said, settling his hat back on his head. "Let me get your trunk from wherever the stage driver left it, then we will get you settled. You hungry? The restaurant down the street makes a decent stew." "I could eat," Zara admitted, suddenly aware that she had not had anything since a sad sandwich at the stage stop that morning. She followed Kieran down the boardwalk, noting the way people nodded to him in greeting, the way his hand rested casually near his gun belt but never quite touched it. He moved like someone comfortable in his own skin, confident without being arrogant. They found her trunk where she had last seen it, and Kieran hefted it onto his shoulder like it weighed nothing. He led her past the general store, where the owner was sweeping broken glass from his front window, and down a side street to where a large barn stood next to a fenced corral. The smell of horses and hay filled the air, familiar and somehow comforting. "Tom," Kieran called out to a grizzled man who was brushing down a gray mare. "This is Miss Connelly. She's going to use my room tonight. I will bunk down in the stable." Tom looked Zara over with the shrewd eyes of someone who had seen everything twice. "Margaret's cousin." "Yes, sir," Zara said. "Sorry about Margaret. She was good people." Tom jerked his thumb toward the back of the stable. "Room is up those stairs, first door on the right. Kieran keeps it paid up even when he is not using it, so it is clean enough. Outhouse is out back. Pump is by the water trough." "Thank you," Zara said, meaning it. She followed Kieran up a narrow staircase built against the outside of the stable, her legs aching from the long journey. The room was small but clean, as Tom had promised. It contained a narrow bed covered with a faded quilt, a washstand with a chipped basin, a small table with one chair, and hooks on the wall for hanging clothes. A single window looked out over the corral. Kieran set her trunk down gently. "I know it is not fancy, but the roof does not leak, and Tom keeps the rats out of the stable pretty well." "It is perfect," Zara said, and she meant it. After the last few hours, any safe place would have seemed like a palace. "I cannot thank you enough, Kieran. You have been incredibly kind to a stranger." He shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed. "My mama raised me to help people when I can. Come on, let us get some food in you. You look like you could use it." The restaurant was a small establishment run by a Chinese couple who greeted Kieran like an old friend, and served up bowls of beef stew thick with vegetables and chunks of fresh bread still warm from the oven. Zara ate with more appetite than she had expected, listening as Kieran told her about Watsonville, about the ranches in the surrounding hills, about the trouble with rustlers and outlaws that had been plaguing the area for the past year. "It was not always like this," he said, sopping up the last of his stew with a piece of bread. "Used to be a nice, quiet town. Then the railroad announced they might be coming through here, and suddenly everyone wants a piece of it. Land prices went up, which brought in speculators, which brought in the criminal element looking to prey on folks. It will settle down eventually, once people realize the railroad might not come for another 5 or 10 years. "What do you do at the Double R?" Zara asked, genuinely curious. "Whatever needs doing. I am good with horses, so I do a lot of breaking and training, some fence mending, some cattle driving, some guard work when we move stock to market. I have been there about 4 years now, since I was 21. Steady work, decent pay, and the boss is fair." "Do you have family around here?" Kieran's expression shuddered slightly. "No, my folks died when I was 17. Cholera. I drifted for a while before ending up here. What about you? What were you doing in San Francisco?" "Working as a seamstress in a dress shop." The pay was terrible, and the hours were long, but I was good at it. When Margaret wrote and said she could use help running the boarding house, it seemed like a chance to do something more, to build something of my own eventually. Zara pushed her empty bowl away. Now I suppose I will have to find work here, at least until I can save enough for a ticket somewhere else. Can you still do seamstress work? Of course. I brought my sewing kit and some fabric samples with me. Then you might be in luck. There is no dressmaker or tailor in Watsonville. Folks either make do with ready-made clothes from the general store or have to travel to Salinas or Monterey for anything custom. If you are as good as you say, you could probably make a decent living. Hope flickered in Zara's chest. I would need a place to work, though, and to live. There is a building on Main Street that used to be a milliner's shop. The owner moved back east last year, and it has been sitting empty. Might be you could rent it cheap. As for living space, there is a room in the back of most of these commercial buildings. Kieran pulled out his pocket watch and checked the time. Too late to do anything about it tonight, but tomorrow I could introduce you to Henry Walsh. He owns half the buildings in town. Why are you helping me? Zara asked suddenly. You do not know me at all. Kieran was quiet for a moment, his fingers turning his coffee cup in slow circles on the table. I remember what it was like to be alone in a strange place with no money and no prospects. Someone helped me when I needed it, a rancher who gave me a job even though I did not know one end of a cow from the other. I figure I am just passing that along. It was a simple answer, but Zara could hear the truth in it. She smiled at him, really smiled for the first time since arriving in Watsonville. Well, I am very grateful, regardless of the reason. They walked back to the livery stable through streets that had gone quiet under a sky full of stars. The air smelled like ocean salt and horse, and the faint sweetness of wild mustard growing in the fields beyond town. Kieran walked her up to the room, checked the window latch to make sure it was secure, and wished her a good night. I will be right downstairs if you need anything, he said from the doorway. Just holler. Zara changed into her nightdress and washed her face in the basin, scrubbing away the mud and dust from her dramatic arrival. She lay down on the narrow bed, expecting to toss and turn with worry about her uncertain future. But exhaustion claimed her almost immediately. She woke to bright sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of horses being led out of the stable below. For a moment she could not remember where she was, then it all came back with a rush. Margaret, the gunfight, Kieran Turner and his unexpected kindness. Zara dressed quickly in her other good dress, a simple gray cotton that had survived the journey better than the green one, and pinned up her dark hair. She found Kieran outside the stable, talking to Tom about a horse that needed new shoes. He looked like he had already been awake for hours, clean-shaven and alert. "Morning," he said when he saw her. "Sleep all right, better than I expected. Thank you again for the room." "No problem. I talked to Tom, and he says you can keep staying here for 50 cents a week until you get something more permanent sorted out. That is cheaper than anywhere else in town, and it is safe." He paused. "If you want to, I mean, no pressure." "That is very generous, I accept." Zara did a quick mental calculation of the money she had left. She could afford a few weeks at that rate if she was careful. Good. Now let us go see Henry Walsh about that shop space. Henry Walsh turned out to be a portly man in his 50s who ran the town's only bank and owned various properties around Watsonville. He met them in his office, a cluttered room filled with ledgers and maps, and the smell of cigar smoke. Kieran made the introductions and explained Zara's situation while she sat quietly, trying to look competent and professional despite her limited resources. "A dressmaker, you say?" Walsh leaned back in his chair, making it creak alarmingly. That could work out well. My wife is always complaining about the lack of decent clothing options. The old millinery shop is available. It has a good front room for customers, a back room with a stove for living quarters and storage space upstairs. I could let you have it for $8 a month. Zara's heart sank. That was more than she could afford, at least initially. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Walsh, but I would need time to build up a customer base before I could manage that. I could offer you $5 a month for the first 3 months, then $8 after that if the business is doing well. Walsh stroked his chin, considering. Tell you what, give me $6 a month and we will call it a deal, but I want the first month in advance. $6 she could manage barely. Agreed. They shook hands and Walsh produced a key and a simple rental contract. Within an hour, Zara found herself standing in her new shop, looking around at the dusty space with a mixture of excitement and terror. The front room had a large window facing the street, good for displaying her work. There were shelves along one wall and a counter that would work perfectly for cutting fabric. The back room was small but adequate, with a pot-bellied stove, a cot, and enough space for her trunk. It was not much, but it was hers. What do you think? Kieran asked from the doorway. I think I have a lot of work to do, Zara said, but she was smiling. I need to clean this place from top to bottom, get some supplies, make some sample pieces to show what I can do. I have got to head back to the ranch this afternoon, but I will be in town again in a few days. If you need anything, Tom knows how to reach me. He hesitated, then added, You are going to do fine, Zara. I can tell you are the kind of person who makes things work. I hope you are right, she said. Then, impulsively, she crossed the room and took his hand. Thank you, Kieran, for everything. I do not know what I would have done if you had not helped me yesterday. His hand was warm and calloused, his grip firm but gentle. Like I said, just passing along a kindness. Good luck, Zara Connelly. She watched him walk away down the street, this stranger who had appeared at exactly the right moment and changed everything. Then she rolled up her sleeves and got to work. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Zara cleaned every surface in the shop until it gleamed, used some of her precious savings to buy basic supplies from the general store, and began sewing sample pieces to display in her window. She made a simple day dress in blue calico, a more elaborate visiting dress in wine-colored wool, and a man's shirt with fine detailed stitching to show her range. Word spread quickly through Watsonville that a real dressmaker had set up shop. Her first customer was Henry Walsh's wife, Eleanor, a kind woman who ordered 3 new dresses and spread the word to all her friends. Then came the wives of local ranchers, the school teacher, even one of the saloon girls looking for something nicer than her usual gaudy costumes. Zara worked long hours, her fingers moving automatically through stitches she had practiced 10,000 times. She made enough to pay her rent and buy food and slowly, carefully, began to build a small savings cushion. She made friends with the other shopkeepers, learned the rhythms of the town, and started to feel like maybe Watsonville could actually become home. She saw Kieran a few times when he came to town on ranch business. He always stopped by the shop to say hello, to ask how things were going, to admire her latest work with genuine interest. They fell into an easy friendship, comfortable and uncomplicated. He told her stories about ranch life, about the horses he was training and the trouble with coyotes in the north pasture. She told him about her customers and their demands, about the challenges of getting good fabric and the satisfaction of creating something beautiful. Sometimes she caught herself watching him when he did not notice, admiring the way he moved, the ready smile he had for everyone, the quiet competence with which he approached everything. But she pushed those thoughts away. Kieran Turner was a friend who had helped her in her hour of need. That was all. October arrived with cooler temperatures and the promise of rain. Zara had been in Watsonville for almost 2 months and was starting to feel established. She had enough regular customers to keep busy, had paid her rent on time, and had even been able to buy a few pieces of furniture for her living space: a real bed frame, a proper table and chairs, a mirror. Then the storm warning started. Old-timers in town muttered about the clouds building over the ocean, about the way the wind was shifting, about how it felt like the big storm of 1862 all over again. Zara did not know what that meant until Tom explained that back in 1862. California had experienced weeks of continuous rain that flooded the entire Central Valley and turned much of the state into an inland sea. "That was before my time, but my pa told me about it," Tom said, securing the stable doors with extra crossbars. "Killed thousands of cattle, washed away whole towns. Took years to recover. Now, this probably would not be that bad, but with the way that sky looks, we are in for some serious weather." He was right. The rain started on a Tuesday afternoon in late October, a light drizzle that quickly built into a steady downpour. By evening it was coming down in sheets, driven by winds that made the shop's front window rattle in its frame. Zara moved her fabric to higher shelves just in case and checked the roof for leaks, finding only a small drip in the back corner that she caught with a bucket. The rain continued all night and into the next day. The street turned to mud, then to a small river as water ran down from the hills. Some shops closed early, their owners unwilling to wade through the mess. Zara kept working on a dress commission, listening to the storm rage outside and feeling grateful for her solid walls and dry roof. On the third day of rain, someone pounded on her door just after she had closed for the evening. Zara opened it to find Kieran standing on her threshold, soaked to the skin and looking worried. "The creek is rising," he said without preamble. "Tom says it could flood the livery stable, maybe this whole side of the street. We are moving the horses to higher ground, but I wanted to check that you are all right." "I am fine. Do you think I should leave?" "Maybe. The hotel is on higher ground and they are taking people in." He glanced past her into the shop. "You could move your most important things there, just to be safe." Zara quickly gathered her sewing kit, her box of savings, and a few changes of clothes while Kieran waited. The rain was coming down so hard she could barely see across the street. They sloshed through ankle-deep water toward the center of town, where the hotel stood on a slight rise. Other people had the same idea, and the lobby was crowded with worried-looking families and their hastily packed belongings. "We are full up," the hotel clerk said apologetically. "But you are welcome to wait in the lobby until the storm passes." Zara looked around at the crowded space, at children crying and adults arguing over floor space. Then she looked at Kieran, who was wringing water out of his hat with a grim expression. "The ranch is on high ground," he said slowly, as if thinking out loud. "And the road there is still passable if we go now before the creek rises any more. There is plenty of room in the bunkhouse, or you could stay in the main house. The boss's wife would not mind. Are you going back there now?" "I was planning to. Someone needs to help secure things, and the hands who live out there will need extra help with the stock." He met her eyes. "You would be safer there than here, honestly. This part of town might flood, but the double R is on a hill." Zara made a decision. "Then I will come with you." They stopped by the shop so she could grab a few more things, including her warmest cloak and her good boots. Then they made their way to the livery stable, where Tom was loading the last of the horses into a high-sided wagon. "Taking Miss Connelly to the ranch," Kieran told him. "You should come too, Tom. That water is rising fast. Already planning on it. going to my sister's place on the east side. Tom secured the last horse and climbed onto the wagon seat. You two be careful out there. Road might be washed out in places. Kieran had a horse saddled and waiting, a sturdy bay gelding that stood patiently in the rain. He swung up into the saddle and then reached down to pull Zara up behind him. She had never ridden like this before, perched on the horse's rump with her arms around Kieran's waist, but she did not have much choice. She held on tight as he urged the horse forward into the storm. The ride to the Double R was harrowing. The rain was relentless, a cold wall of water that soaked through Zara's cloak and made it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. The road had become a stream in places, and twice they had to detour around washouts. Zara clung to Kieran, feeling the solid warmth of him through his wet clothes, trusting him to get them through safely. It took over an hour to cover the 5 miles, but finally they emerged from a stand of dripping oak trees to see the ranch buildings ahead. There were several structures, a large barn, a bunkhouse, a cookhouse, and a main house with lamplight glowing warmly in the windows. Kieran rode straight to the barn, where several men were working to secure the doors and calm restless horses. Kieran. A stocky man with a thick mustache came toward them. Wondered if you would make it back. Creek is already over its banks down by the south pasture. This is Zara Connelly, Kieran said, helping her slide down from the horse. She has a shop in town, but I thought she would be safer here. Zara, this is Jack Morrison, the foreman. Pleased to meet you, miss, Jack said, touching his hat brim. Any friend of Kieran's is welcome. Why do not you go up to the main house? Mrs. Randolph will get you dried off and fed. Kieran, soon as you are settled, we could use your help with the livestock. I will be right there, Kieran promised. He led Zara toward the main house, carrying her bag. Ellen Randolph is good people. Her husband owns the ranch, but he is away in San Francisco on business. She will take care of you. Ellen Randolph turned out to be a handsome woman in her 40s with graying blonde hair and a capable manner. She took one look at Zara's bedraggled state and immediately ushered her inside, sat her by the fire, and brought her hot coffee and a warm blanket. You poor thing, you are soaked through. Let me show you where you can change into dry clothes. She led Zara upstairs to a pleasant guest room with a real bed and pretty curtains. I will bring you some supper in a bit. You just make yourself comfortable. Zara changed into dry clothes with shaking fingers, only now realizing how cold she had gotten on the ride. The dress she put on was wrinkled from being packed in her bag, but it was dry, and that was all that mattered. She went back downstairs to find Ellen setting the table for supper. The men will eat in the cookhouse, but you and I can have a civilized meal, Ellen said, ladling out thick beef stew. Tell me about yourself, dear. Kieran said you have a dress shop in town. They talked through dinner, Ellen asking interested questions about Zara's business and telling her about ranch life in return. Ellen's husband Thomas had built the Double R from nothing 20 years ago, and they had raised 3 sons here, all now grown and working their own ranches or businesses elsewhere. It gets lonely sometimes with just the ranch hands for company, Ellen admitted. Thomas travels a lot for business and I am left managing things here. I am grateful for the company, honestly. You are welcome to stay as long as the storm lasts. Thank you. I appreciate your hospitality. The rain continued to pound against the windows. Ellen showed Zara to the guest room again and bid her good night. Zara lay in the comfortable bed, listening to the storm and thinking about the series of coincidences that had brought her here. If Margaret had not died, if the Carson brothers had not started shooting, if Kieran had not been there at exactly the right moment, her life would look completely different now. She must have dozed off because she woke to the sound of voices downstairs. The room was dark and rain still hammered at the window. She got up and crept to the door, listening. She could hear Ellen talking to someone, her voice worried. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough." That was Kieran's voice, tired and strained. "The creek is out of its banks and spreading across the south pasture. We moved all the stock to higher ground, but we lost some fence line, and the bridge on the main road is underwater. Nobody is getting in or out of here until this storm breaks." "What about the hands?" "Everyone is accounted for. Jack sent the day workers to shelter in the barn loft. It is dry enough there, but we are going to have to keep watch through the night in case the water keeps rising." "You look exhausted, Kieran. When did you last sleep?" "Yesterday sometime." "I am fine, Mrs. Randolph." "You are not fine. You need rest. Take one of the upstairs rooms and get some sleep. The other men can handle watch for a few hours." "I appreciate it, but all the guest rooms are full with supplies we moved from the lower storage." "Well, there is the small room at the end of the hall. It has a bed." There was a pause. "Is that not where Miss Connelly is staying?" "No, dear, she is in the blue room. The small room is separate." "All right, then." "Thank you, madam. Just a few hours, then I will relieve Jack on watch." Zara heard footsteps on the stairs and quickly retreated to her bed. She lay in the darkness, wide awake now, listening to the storm and worrying about everything. The shop, the bridge, how long they might be stranded here. Eventually, she heard someone come upstairs and move down the hall, heard a door open and close. Kieran, getting what little rest he could. She must have fallen asleep again because the next thing she knew, daylight was filtering through the curtains. The rain had not stopped, but it seemed slightly less violent than before. Zara dressed and went downstairs to find Ellen in the kitchen, making breakfast. "Morning, dear. Did you sleep well?" "Well enough, thank you. Is there anything I can do to help?" "You can take this out to the men in the cookhouse if you do not mind." Ellen handed her a basket covered with a cloth. "Fresh biscuits. They have been working all night and they will appreciate it." Zara wrapped herself in her still damp cloak and made a run for the cookhouse, a low building about 50 yards from the main house. Inside, she found a dozen men gathered around a long table, drinking coffee and talking in low voices. They looked up when she entered, and several of them scrambled to their feet. "Miss Connelly," Jack Morrison said, "what brings you out in this weather?" "Biscuits from Mrs. Randolph," Zara said, setting the basket on the table. The men descended on it like starving wolves, and she could not help but smile. "You are a sight for sore eyes, miss," one of the younger hands said through a mouthful of biscuit. "Excuse me for saying so." "Is Kieran here?" she asked, looking around. "Still sleeping, hopefully," Jack said. "He was up all night helping secure the north pasture fence. We finally made him go rest a few hours ago." Zara nodded and made her way back to the main house, getting soaked all over again in the process. The day passed slowly. She helped Ellen with various household tasks, mended a few items of clothing, and stared out the window at the endless rain. By evening, the water had spread even further, turning the lower pastures into lakes and making the ranch buildings seem like islands in a gray sea. Kieran appeared at dinner time, looking slightly more rested but still exhausted. He ate quickly, barely tasting his food, then went back out to help the hands check on the livestock. This pattern continued for the next 2 days. The storm would not quit, showing no signs of letting up. The rain just kept coming, relentless and cold, and the water kept rising. On the 5th day, things took a turn for the worse. One of the hands came running to the house at midday, shouting that the barn roof was leaking badly, and they needed to move the horses before the whole structure became unsafe. Kieran and several other men spent hours in the pouring rain, leading frightened horses through knee-deep water to the safety of a higher stable that was normally used for equipment storage. By evening, Kieran was so exhausted he could barely stand. Ellen made him sit by the fire and drink hot broth, scolding him like he was one of her sons. "You are going to make yourself sick, working like this without proper rest," she said firmly. "I know you feel responsible, but you are no good to anyone if you collapse." "I am fine," Kieran said, but his hands shook as he held the cup. "You are not fine. You are sleeping in the house tonight, and that is final. No arguments." "Yes, madam," Kieran said meekly. Later that evening, Ellen pulled Zara aside. "I hate to ask this, dear, but we have a bit of a situation. The small room where Kieran was sleeping has started leaking. The roof must have developed a crack during the storm. I have moved all the bedding out, but that means we are one room short." Zara could see where this was going. "It is all right, Mrs. Randolph. I can sleep in a chair by the fire." "Absolutely not. You have already been through enough." Ellen hesitated, then said, "The blue room where you are staying has a very large bed, and Kieran is a perfect gentleman. I was thinking perhaps you could share the room with Kieran sleeping on the floor, of course. It is only for a night or two, until we can figure something else out." Zara knew she should probably object, knew this was the kind of situation that could ruin a woman's reputation if anyone found out. But Ellen was looking at her with such apologetic hopefulness, and Kieran had done so much for her already, and honestly they were all just trying to survive this storm. "That would be fine," Zara said. "I am sure Kieran would not mind." Ellen looked relieved. "You are a dear. I will explain the situation to him." An hour later, Kieran appeared at the door of the blue room with his bedroll and a pillow. He looked deeply uncomfortable. "Zara, I am really sorry about this. If there was any other option, I would take it. I will sleep on the floor right here by the door, and I promise I will not bother you at all." "I know," Zara said. "It is just sleeping, Kieran. We are both adults, and this is an emergency situation. It is fine." He nodded, still looking uncomfortable, and began arranging his bedroll on the floor. Zara changed into her nightdress behind a privacy screen in the corner, then climbed into the large bed. It felt absurdly decadent after the narrow cot in her shop, all soft mattress and clean sheets and warm quilts. "Good night, Kieran," she said, turning down the lamp. "Good night, Zara." She lay in the darkness, listening to him settle on the floor, hearing the rain continue its assault on the roof. It felt strange knowing he was there, just a few feet away, separated by nothing but air and propriety. But it also felt oddly comforting, less lonely than sleeping in a room by herself while the storm raged outside. She woke sometime in the middle of the night to the sound of Kieran moving restlessly. The room was cold, the fire in the small hearth having burned down to embers. She could hear him shifting position, trying to get comfortable on the hard floor. After a few minutes of this, she could not stand it anymore. "Kieran," she whispered. "Are you awake?" "Yes, sorry, I did not mean to disturb you." "You are not disturbing me, but you are clearly miserable down there." "I am fine." "You are not fine. You have been working yourself to exhaustion for days, and now you are trying to sleep on a hard floor. This bed is enormous. There is plenty of room for both of us." Silence. "Then, Zara, I do not think that is a good idea." "Why not?" "We are both perfectly capable of sleeping in the same bed without anything inappropriate happening. We are adults, not children." She paused. "You helped me when I had nothing, Kieran. Let me do this small thing for you. Get some proper rest." Another long silence. Then she heard him stand up, heard the rustling as he picked up his bedroll. "Are you sure?" "I am sure." He climbed into the other side of the bed, staying as far from her as possible, practically hanging off the edge. Zara almost laughed at his exaggerated caution. The bed was big enough that they were not even close to touching, a good 2 feet of space between them. "See," she said. "Perfectly appropriate." "Thank you, Zara," he said quietly, "for understanding. Try to get some sleep." Within minutes, she heard his breathing slow and deepen as exhaustion finally claimed him. She lay awake a little longer, very aware of his presence but also strangely comfortable with it. There was something about Kieran Turner that made her feel safe, like she could trust him completely. It was a feeling she had not experienced in a long time, not since her parents died. When she woke in the morning, Kieran was already gone, his side of the bed neatly made. She could hear voices downstairs and the ever-present sound of rain. She dressed quickly and went down to find Ellen and Kieran in the kitchen, discussing the state of the ranch. "The creek is finally starting to recede," Kieran was saying. "If the rain stops today, we might be able to assess the damage tomorrow." "And if it does not stop?" Ellen asked. "Then we keep doing what we have been doing. Keep the stock safe, keep the building secure, wait it out." The rain did not stop that day or the next. The storm seemed determined to break some kind of record, dumping water on the already saturated land without mercy. But Kieran had been right about the creek. It stopped rising and began slowly to recede, leaving mud and debris in its wake. That night, Kieran again appeared at the door of the blue room with his bedroll. But this time, after Zara had changed and climbed into bed, she simply patted the other side of the mattress. "No point in pretending," she said. "We both know you sleep better here than on the floor." He hesitated for only a moment before setting his bedroll aside and climbing in beside her. They maintained their careful distance, but Zara found herself relaxing in a way she had not expected. There was something deeply comforting about having another person nearby, about not being alone in the storm. "Can I ask you something?" Kieran said into the darkness. "Of course." "Why did you really leave San Francisco? I mean, I know about Margaret and the boarding house, but was there more to it?" Zara considered her answer carefully. "After my parents died, I felt like I was just going through the motions. Wake up, work, sleep, repeat. No family, no real friends, no hope of anything changing. When Margaret's letters started coming, talking about Watsonville and new opportunities, it felt like a chance to actually live again instead of just existing." She paused. "I know that probably sounds dramatic. No, it makes sense. I felt the same way after my folks died. Drifting from place to place, working odd jobs, not really caring about anything. Then I ended up here, and Jack Morrison took a chance on me even though I did not know anything about ranch work. It gave me a purpose, a place to belong." He was quiet for a moment. "I am glad you came here, Zara, even though the circumstances were not what you expected." "I am too," she said, and realized she meant it completely. The next morning brought a miracle. Zara woke to silence, an absence of sound so profound it took her a moment to understand what it meant. The rain had stopped. She sat up quickly, looking toward the window where pale sunlight was trying to break through the clouds. "Kieran, wake up." The rain stopped. He was awake instantly, rolling out of bed and going to the window. I will be damned. It actually stopped. The household came alive with activity. Everyone ventured outside to survey the damage, wading through mud and standing water to check on buildings and fences and livestock. The barn had sustained some roof damage but was repairable. Several miles of fence line had been destroyed. The bridge on the main road was indeed underwater, but with the rain stopped, it would emerge in a day or two. All things considered, the Double R had weathered the storm remarkably well. "We got lucky," Jack Morrison said, standing with Kieran and Zara in the muddy yard. "Another few days of rain and we might have lost the whole place." Over the next few days, life slowly returned to normal. The water receded, leaving behind mud and debris that would take weeks to fully clean up. The hands began repairing fences and clearing damage. Ellen's husband Thomas finally made it back from San Francisco, full of stories about flooding in the city and travel delays. The road to Watsonville became passable again, and Zara knew she needed to get back to her shop, to check on the damage and reassure her customers that she was still in business. But she found herself reluctant to leave the ranch, to leave the warmth and companionship she had found there. On the morning she planned to return to town, Kieran found her in the barn, saying goodbye to the horses she had befriended during her stay. "I will drive you back in the wagon," he said. "Give you a chance to bring anything you need to salvage from the shop." They made the trip in comfortable silence, the wagon rattling over roads still muddy from the storm. Watsonville looked battered but intact. Some buildings had sustained flooding damage, and there was debris everywhere, but the town was already beginning to clean up and rebuild. Zara's shop had about 3 inches of water damage to the lowest shelf, ruining some fabric she had stored there, but the rest of the space was fine. Her living quarters in the back were untouched. She felt a wave of relief so strong it almost made her dizzy. "Looks like you came through all right," Kieran said, helping her move the damaged fabric outside. "Thanks to you. If I had stayed here during the storm instead of going to the ranch, I would have been stuck alone dealing with the flooding." She turned to face him. "I owe you more than I can ever repay, Kieran Turner. You have helped me over and over, asking nothing in return. I told you I am just passing along kindness." But his eyes were warm, and he was looking at her in a way that made her heart beat faster. "Is that all it is?" she asked quietly. Kieran took off his hat, turning it in his hands in that gesture she had come to recognize as a sign he was thinking hard. "I would be lying if I said that was all it is, but I also did not want to take advantage of you being in a difficult situation. You came here looking for a new start, and I did not want to complicate that." Zara stepped closer to him. "What if I do not mind complications, Zara?" He said her name like a prayer, like a question, like a promise all at once. She reached up and took his hat from his hands, setting it on the counter. Then she stood on her toes and kissed him, soft and careful, giving him every chance to pull away if this was not what he wanted. He did not pull away. Instead, he drew her closer, his arms coming around her waist as he deepened the kiss. It felt like coming home, like finding something she had not even known she was looking for. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "I have wanted to do that since the first night we shared that room," Kieran admitted. "Lying there in the dark, knowing you were so close but feeling like I had no right to want more." "You have every right," Zara said. "I have been falling for you a little bit more every day, Kieran. The way you help people, the way you work so hard, the way you make me laugh even when things seem impossible. I have never felt this way about anyone before." He kissed her again, slower this time, like they had all the time in the world. When they finally pulled apart, he was smiling in a way she had never seen before. All his usual guardedness dropped away. "So what happens now?" he asked. "Now we figure it out together. I have a business to rebuild and you have a ranch to help run. But we can see each other when you are in town, and maybe I can visit the ranch sometimes. We will make it work." "I would like that very much." They spent the rest of the day cleaning up the shop, working side by side, stealing kisses when no one was looking through the window. By evening, Zara had salvaged what she could and had a plan for getting back to business. Kieran had to return to the ranch, but he promised to come back to town the following week. "Be safe," Zara said, walking him out to the wagon. "Always. You too." He kissed her one more time, sweet and lingering, then climbed up to the wagon seat. She watched him drive away, her heart full in a way it had not been in years. The next few months passed in a blur of hard work and growing affection. Zara threw herself into rebuilding her business, and her customers returned in droves, grateful that she had survived the storm. Word spread about her quality work, and she found herself busier than ever, taking commissions for everything from simple work dresses to elaborate ball gowns for special occasions. Kieran came to town whenever he could, which was usually twice a week. They would have dinner together, take walks around the town, sit in her shop talking long into the evening. He told her about his dreams of maybe owning his own ranch someday, about the horses he was training, about the changing seasons on the Double R. She told him about her customers and their stories, about the dress she was making for a wedding, about the money she was slowly saving. They fell deeper in love with each passing day. It was not the dramatic, overwhelming passion of dime novels, but something steadier and more real. It was the way Kieran always remembered to bring her coffee when he visited, made exactly how she liked it. It was the way Zara mended his shirts without being asked, adding little touches of embroidery that made him smile. It was 1,000 small kindnesses and considerations that built something solid and true. Ellen Randolph became a friend, inviting Zara to the ranch for Sunday dinners and treating her like one of the family. The other ranch hands accepted her presence with good-natured teasing about Kieran finally settling down. Even Thomas Randolph, when he was around, seemed to approve of the relationship. Christmas came, and Zara spent it at the Double R, helping Ellen cook a massive feast for all the hands. Kieran gave her a beautiful silver thimble engraved with her initials, something he must have saved for weeks to afford. She gave him a new vest she had made, butter-soft leather with careful stitching that had taken her hours to complete. They exchanged gifts in front of the whole household, but later, in the privacy of the guest room she was staying in, they exchanged something more valuable: promises, commitments, plans for a future together. "I want to marry you," Kieran said, holding her hands in his. "I know we have not known each other that long by most standards, but I have never been more sure of anything in my life. You are what I have been looking for without knowing I was looking. You are home to me, Zara." She was crying happy tears that she did not bother to wipe away. "Yes. Yes, I will marry you. I love you, Kieran. I have loved you since you helped me up from the mud on my first day in Watsonville." They told Ellen the next morning, and she immediately began planning a wedding with the enthusiasm of someone who had been waiting years for an excuse to throw a party. The date was set for March, early enough to avoid the spring rains but late enough to give Zara time to make her own dress. She worked on that dress in every spare moment, pouring all her skill and love into creating something beautiful. It was ivory silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs, fitted at the bodice and falling in soft folds to the floor. She embroidered tiny flowers along the hem, stitches so fine they looked like they had been painted on. Kieran was less involved in the planning, content to let Zara and Ellen make most of the decisions. But he did build furniture for the small house they would live in, the one that came with his job at the Double R. He made a bed frame and a table and chairs, working in the ranch workshop during his off hours, sanding each piece until it was smooth as glass. March arrived with clear skies and the smell of wild flowers. The wedding was held at the ranch, with the whole town of Watsonville invited. Ellen had decorated the barn with ribbons and spring blossoms, transforming the rough space into something magical. The local minister performed the ceremony, and Zara walked down the makeshift aisle alone, her parents gone but their memory alive in her heart. Kieran was waiting for her at the end, wearing a new suit and looking more nervous than she had ever seen him. But when she took his hand, his grip was steady and sure. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, and Zara felt tears prick her eyes again. Happy tears, grateful tears. Tears for the journey that had brought her here and the future that stretched out ahead. They said their vows, simple words that carried the weight of everything they felt. They exchanged rings, plain gold bands that Kieran had bought with his savings. And then the minister pronounced them husband and wife, and Kieran kissed her to the cheers of everyone gathered. The celebration lasted into the evening, with food and music and dancing. Zara danced with her new husband, with Thomas Randolph, with Jack Morrison, and half the ranch hands. She laughed until her sides ached and ate until she was full, and felt more purely happy than she could ever remember being. As the sun set and the party began to wind down, Kieran took her hand and led her away from the crowd, toward the small house that was now their home. Someone had decorated the porch with flowers, and lamplight glowed warmly from inside. "Welcome home, Mrs. Turner," Kieran said, sweeping her up in his arms and carrying her over the threshold. The house was small but perfect, every surface polished and every corner filled with evidence of Kieran's care. He had hung curtains on the windows, stocked the shelves with dishes, filled the lamp with oil. It was ready for them to begin their life together. "It is perfect," Zara said, looking around with wonder. "You did all this. I wanted it to be ready. Wanted you to feel like you were coming home, not just to a house, but to a place that was ours." He set her down gently, his hands lingering at her waist. "Are you happy, Zara?" "Happier than I ever thought possible," she said, reaching up to cup his face. "I love you so much, Kieran Turner. I love you too, more than words can say." He kissed her then, deep and slow and full of promise. And as the evening turned to night, they began their married life together. Two people who had found each other in the chaos of a storm and built something beautiful from that chance meeting. Life settled into a new rhythm. Zara kept her shop in Watsonville, traveling there 3 days a week to work on commissions and meet with customers. The other days she spent at the ranch, helping Ellen with household tasks or working on sewing projects she could do at home. It was a good balance, allowing her to maintain her independence and business while also being part of the ranch community. Kieran continued his work with the horses, gaining a reputation as one of the best trainers in the area. He was patient and skilled, able to gentle even the most skittish animals. Thomas Randolph began giving him more responsibilities, putting him in charge of the horse operation and raising his pay accordingly. They were happy, genuinely and deeply happy. They talked about everything, their pasts and presents and futures. They worked together on improving their home, Zara making curtains and quilts while Kieran built shelves and a front porch. They made friends among the other ranch families and became fixtures at community gatherings. A year into their marriage, Zara realized she was pregnant. She told Kieran on a warm evening in June as they sat on their new porch watching the sunset. He was quiet for a long moment, then pulled her into a fierce hug. "A baby," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" she asked, suddenly nervous. "Happy does not even begin to cover it. I am terrified and excited and grateful all at once." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes shining. "You are going to be an amazing mother, Zara. And you are going to be an amazing father." The pregnancy was not easy. Zara was sick for the first few months, barely able to keep anything down. Ellen fussed over her like a mother hen, making special broths and teas that sometimes helped. Kieran was endlessly patient, holding her hair when she was sick and rubbing her back when she could not sleep. As her belly grew, she had to cut back on her work at the shop, taking only the commissions she could manage from home. Her customers understood, sending their congratulations and their business. She trained a young woman named Sarah to help with the simpler projects, creating a partnership that would allow the business to continue even after the baby came. In February of 1879, on a cold, clear night with stars blazing overhead, Zara went into labor. Ellen and the doctor were there, and Kieran paced outside, driven from the room by the women who insisted he would just be in the way. The labor was long and hard, and there were moments when Zara wondered if she would survive it. But just before dawn, as the first light was breaking over the eastern hills, a baby's cry filled the room. Zara collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted beyond measure as Ellen placed a squirming bundle in her arms. "It is a boy," the doctor announced, smiling. "A healthy, strong boy." Kieran was allowed back into the room, and the look on his face when he saw his son was something Zara would remember for the rest of her life. Pure wonder, pure love, pure joy all mixed together. "He is perfect," Kieran said, reaching out a tentative finger to touch the baby's tiny hand. The infant immediately gripped it, and Kieran laughed, a sound of delight and amazement. They named him Matthew James Turner, after Kieran's father and Zara's father. He had Kieran's sandy brown hair and Zara's dark eyes, and from the beginning, he had a calm, observant nature that made people think he was taking in everything around him. Being new parents was harder than either of them had expected. Matthew was a good baby, but he still woke every few hours to eat, and the exhaustion was relentless. Zara could not work at the shop for months, focused entirely on caring for her son. Kieran helped when he could, but ranch work did not stop for new babies, and he often came home too tired to do more than collapse into bed. But they made it work, supporting each other through the difficult early months. Ellen was a godsend, teaching Zara things about babies that her own mother would have taught her if she had lived. The other ranch wives formed a community around them, bringing meals and advice and offering to watch Matthew so Zara could rest. By the time Matthew was 6 months old, things had settled into a manageable routine. Zara started taking on small sewing projects again, working while the baby napped. Kieran got a raise and a promotion, becoming the official head of the horse program at the Double R. They were building a good life, better than either of them had dared to hope for during those early, uncertain days. When Matthew was 2, Zara realized she was pregnant again. This time the news was met with more confidence and less terror, though she knew it would not be easy managing a toddler and a newborn. Their second child, a daughter they named Alice Rose, was born in the spring of 1881. She was smaller than Matthew had been, with Zara's dark hair and Kieran's green eyes, and from the beginning she was a force of nature, demanding attention and making her presence known. The house that had seemed perfectly adequate for a couple now felt cramped with 2 small children. Kieran approached Thomas Randolph about the possibility of building a larger home on a piece of ranch land that was not being used for anything else. Thomas agreed immediately, even offering to help with materials. Over the next year, Kieran and several of the ranch hands built a proper house. 2 stories with 4 bedrooms, a real kitchen, and a parlor where Zara could receive customers who did not want to travel into Watsonville. It was the kind of home Zara had dreamed about as a girl, solid and safe and filled with love. They moved in when Alice was a year old and Matthew was 3. Zara immediately set about making it theirs, sewing curtains for every window, making quilts for every bed, creating a space that felt warm and welcoming. Kieran built furniture to fill the rooms, each piece made with care and attention to detail. Life was full and busy and sometimes overwhelming, but it was good. Matthew grew into a thoughtful, gentle boy who loved horses as much as his father did. Alice was wild and free, always into something, always asking questions. Zara managed to keep her sewing business going, though it looked different now. More custom work done from home, less regular shop hours. Sarah eventually took over the Watsonville shop completely, paying Zara a percentage of the profits for the use of her name and reputation. Kieran thrived as head of the horse program. He developed breeding lines that produced some of the finest working horses in the region, and people came from as far as San Francisco to buy Double R stock. His reputation grew, and with it came opportunities. He was offered jobs at larger ranches, positions that would pay more and carry more prestige, but he always turned them down. "I am happy here," he told Zara. "We have a good life, good friends, a place we belong. Why would I risk that for a little more money?" Zara understood completely. She felt the same way. Watsonville and the Double R had become home in a way she had never expected. These were her people. This was her place. She had built something here, not just a business but a whole life. The children grew, and the years passed in the way they do when life is full and good. Matthew started school, proving to be a quick learner with a particular talent for numbers. Alice followed a few years later, charming her teachers and classmates with her bright personality and endless energy. In 1886, when Matthew was 7 and Alice was 5, Zara found herself pregnant one more time. This pregnancy was harder than the previous ones, perhaps because she was older now, 32 instead of 24. She was tired all the time and had to cut back significantly on her work. Kieran worried about her constantly, to the point where she had to reassure him daily that she was fine. Their third child, another boy they named Samuel Thomas after both their grandfathers, was born in early 1887. He was a big baby, over 9 pounds, and the birth was difficult enough that the doctor told Zara she should not have any more children. She and Kieran agreed that 3 was plenty, a good number, a family complete. Samuel was different from his older siblings, quieter than Alice, but more outgoing than Matthew. He had a gift for making people laugh and a sweetness of temperament that won him friends wherever he went. The 3 children were close despite their age differences, playing together and watching out for each other in the way of siblings who genuinely liked each other. Kieran proved to be an extraordinary father. He was patient and kind, firm when he needed to be, but never harsh. He taught Matthew everything about horses, took Alice on long rides through the hills, and carried Samuel on his shoulders around the ranch. He read to them every night, helped with homework, attended school events, and made sure each child knew they were loved and valued. Zara watched him with their children and fell in love with him all over again. This was the man who had helped her up from the mud all those years ago, who had given her shelter during the storm, who had slept on the floor rather than make her uncomfortable. He had become everything she never knew she needed. As the children grew older, Zara was able to return more fully to her work. She took on apprentices, teaching young women the skills her mother had taught her. She developed a specialty in wedding dresses, creating gowns that brides traveled from all over the region to commission. Her work was featured in newspapers, praised for its quality and artistry. Kieran eventually became a full partner in the Double R Ranch. Thomas Randolph, growing older and wanting to retire, sold him a percentage of the operation and put him in charge of day-to-day management. It was an enormous responsibility, but Kieran rose to the challenge, managing the hands and the livestock and the business side of things with the same steady competence he brought to everything. They prospered. Not rich by any means, but comfortable, secure, able to provide for their children and save for the future. They built additions onto the house as needed, added a proper sewing room for Zara, created a library where the children could study. They traveled occasionally, taking the whole family to San Francisco or Monterey, showing the children the wider world beyond Watsonville. Through it all, their love deepened and matured. It was no longer the breathless excitement of new romance, but something richer and more complex. It was built on years of choosing each other every day, of working through problems together, of raising children and building a life. It was partnership and friendship and passion all woven together into something unbreakable. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Kieran surprised Zara with a trip to San Francisco, just the two of them, leaving the children with Ellen for a long weekend. They stayed in a fancy hotel, ate in nice restaurants, went to the theater. But Zara's favorite part was just walking with him through the city streets, her hand in his, talking about everything and nothing. "Are you happy?" Kieran asked her, the same question he had asked on their wedding night 20 years before. "Happier than I ever imagined I could be," Zara answered, the same answer but with 2 decades of proof behind it now. "You gave me everything, Kieran. A home, a family, a love I did not know existed. You gave me a life worth living." "You gave me the same," he said, pulling her close. "I was just drifting before I met you, going through the motions. You gave me purpose and joy and a reason to build something lasting. I love you more now than I did the day we married, and I loved you plenty then." They kissed there on the street, not caring who saw, 2 middle-aged people still completely in love with each other. The years continued their steady march. Matthew graduated from school and chose to stay on at the ranch, working alongside his father and learning the business. Alice went away to a teaching college, came back with a degree and a fiancé, a nice young man from Monterey who treated her like she hung the moon. They married in 1899, and Zara made her daughter's wedding dress with tears streaming down her face, remembering her own wedding and how fast the years had gone. Samuel decided he wanted to be a veterinarian, a relatively new profession but one perfectly suited to his love of animals and his gentle nature. He went to school in Sacramento, wrote home faithfully every week, and came back for visits whenever he could. Kieran's hair went gray at the temples, then gray everywhere. Zara found silver threads in her own dark hair and smiled at them, marks of a life well lived. They moved a little slower than they used to, tired a little more easily, but they were healthy and active, still working, still involved in the ranch and the community. Ellen Randolph passed away in 1902, and Zara mourned her like the mother she had become. Thomas followed her 2 years later, and Kieran found himself the majority owner of the Double R, having bought out the remaining shares over the years. It was a responsibility he took seriously, managing the ranch with the same care and attention to detail he had always brought to the horse program. In 1907, Matthew married a girl from town, and they gave Kieran and Zara their first grandchild, a boy they named Kieran Matthew. Zara held her grandson and felt the circle completing, saw the future stretching out in his tiny face. Alice had children too, 2 daughters who visited the ranch every summer and ran wild through the same hills their mother had explored. Samuel finished his schooling and opened a veterinary practice in Watsonville, serving the ranches and farms of the region. He married a little later than his siblings, but when he did, it was to a smart, capable woman who became Zara's close friend and confidante. The world changed around them. The Wild West they had known in their youth slowly disappeared, replaced by laws and order and modern conveniences. Automobiles appeared on the roads, though Kieran insisted horses were still more reliable. Electricity came to Watsonville, and telephones, and moving pictures. The children they had raised grew up in a different world than the one Zara and Kieran had known, but some things did not change. The love between them, tested and proven over decades, remained constant. The ranch that had given them a home and a livelihood continued to thrive under their careful management. The community they had helped build in Watsonville grew and prospered, becoming a real town with schools and churches and businesses of all kinds. On a warm evening in June of 1917, Zara and Kieran sat on the porch of their home, watching the sun set over the hills. They were both in their 60s now, retired from active work, but still living on the ranch in the house Kieran had built with his own hands. Their children were grown and successful, their grandchildren were numerous and delightful, and they had lived to see things they never could have imagined when they first met. "You ever think about that storm?" Kieran asked, his hand finding hers on the armrest between their rocking chairs. "The one that brought you to the ranch, where we shared that room for the first time." "I think about it all the time," Zara said. "How terrified I was, how uncertain everything seemed, and how you were there, offering help without asking for anything in return. I fell in love with you during that storm, you know. Watching you handle everything with such grace, never complaining, always finding a way to help. I wanted to tell you 100 times, but I did not know how. I fell in love with you then too. Maybe even before that first day when you pulled me out of the mud. You had the kindest eyes I had ever seen." They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching the day fade into night. Somewhere in the house, they could hear their grandchildren playing, visiting for the summer like they did every year. The sounds of laughter and running feet, of childhood joy and energy, filled the air. "We built something good, did not we?" Kieran said. "A good life, a good family, something that will last beyond us." "We did," Zara agreed. "Better than I ever dreamed possible. You gave me everything, Kieran Turner, everything that matters." "No," he said, squeezing her hand gently. "We gave each other everything. That is what made it work. We were partners from the start, equal and committed. That is what love is supposed to be." As the stars began to emerge overhead, the same stars that had witnessed their wedding nearly 40 years before, Zara leaned her head on Kieran's shoulder. She thought about the journey that had brought them here, about the storm that would not quit, and the cowboy who had been too much of a gentleman to share a bed until she asked him to. She thought about the small kindnesses that had built into something monumental, about the love that had grown from seeds planted in mud and rain. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For being you. For being there when I needed someone. For loving me enough to build this life with me." Kieran kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for asking me not to sleep on the floor, for taking a chance on a cowboy who did not have much to offer except a good heart and a willingness to work hard. That was all I ever needed." They sat there together as night fell completely, surrounded by the evidence of their love in the home they had built, the family they had raised, the life they had created from nothing but faith and hard work, and an unwavering commitment to each other. The storm that had brought them together was long past, but what they had built in its aftermath would stand for generations, a testament to the power of kindness, perseverance, and a love that had weathered every challenge life could throw at it. In the end, that was what mattered. Not the dramatic moments or the grand gestures, but the everyday choice to love and support each other, to build something together, to create a home and a family and a legacy that would outlast them both. Zara and Kieran had done that, and as they sat together under the stars, they knew that whatever came next, they would face it the same way they had faced everything else. Together, hand in hand, hearts united, forever and always. The years that followed were quieter but no less rich. Zara and Kieran watched their grandchildren grow, attended their school performances and baseball games, taught them to ride horses and sow and appreciate the land that had given their family so much. They celebrated anniversaries and birthdays, mourned the passing of old friends, and welcomed new members into their ever-expanding family. When Kieran turned 70, Matthew threw him a party that brought together people from all over California, ranchers and business people and families whose lives had been touched by his kindness and integrity. Speech after speech praised him as a man of honor, a skilled horseman, a fair employer, a good friend. But Kieran deflected all the credit, insisting that anything good in his life had come from the partnership he shared with Zara. "She made me better than I was," he said in his own speech, looking directly at his wife. "Every day for more than 40 years, she has challenged me to be kinder, to work harder, to love more deeply. Whatever I have accomplished, it is because she was beside me, believing in me, supporting me, loving me. She is the best thing that ever happened to me, and I thank God for that storm that brought us together." There was not a dry eye in the room, including Zara's. After more than 4 decades together, he could still make her cry with the depth of his love, the sincerity of his devotion. They lived to see the 1920s arrive, bringing with them changes they could never have imagined in their youth. Women got the right to vote, something Alice celebrated with fierce joy. The automobile became commonplace, though Kieran never fully trusted them. The radio brought news and entertainment into their home, connecting them to a wider world. But through all the changes, their love remained the one constant, the bedrock upon which everything else was built. They had weathered storms, both literal and metaphorical, had faced challenges and tragedies and triumphs together, and had emerged stronger each time. They had built not just a life but a legacy, not just a family but a community, not just a home but a sanctuary where love was the foundation of everything. Kieran passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1925, at the age of 74. He had spent the evening on the porch with Zara, talking about their life together and watching the sunset like they had done thousands of times before. He had kissed her good night, told her he loved her, and simply did not wake up the next morning. The doctor said his heart had given out, worn down by decades of hard work, but Zara knew the truth. His heart had been fine. It had just done its job for as long as it needed to, giving love and receiving love and finally, peacefully, stopping when its work was done. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives he had touched. Matthew spoke about his father's integrity and kindness. Alice read a poem about enduring love. Samuel talked about the lessons his father had taught him about compassion and service. But it was Zara who had the last word, standing before the assembled crowd with dry eyes and a steady voice. "Kieran Turner was the best man I ever knew," she said simply. "He helped me when I had nothing, loved me when I felt unlovable, built a life with me that exceeded my wildest dreams. He was my partner, my best friend, my great love. And though he is gone from this world, he lives on in our children and grandchildren, in the ranch he helped build, in the countless lives he touched with his kindness. I will miss him every day for the rest of my life, but I will also be grateful every day that I got to love him and be loved by him. That is a gift not everyone receives, and I know how blessed I was." Zara lived another 8 years after Kieran's death, staying in the home they had built together, surrounded by family and memories. She continued to sew almost to the end, her fingers still nimble and sure even in her 80s. She told stories to her grandchildren and great-grandchildren about the old days, about the storm that would not quit and the cowboy who had been too polite to share a bed until she invited him to. "That is the secret," she told them. "Respect, kindness, choosing each other every single day, even when it is hard, especially when it is hard. Your grandfather and I built something that lasted because we both put in the work, because we both valued what we had, because we both knew that love is not just a feeling but an action, a choice, a commitment." She passed away in her sleep in 1933 at the age of 79, in the same bed where Kieran had died 8 years before. Her children found her there in the morning, peaceful and still, a smile on her face as if she was happy about wherever she had gone. They liked to think she had gone to be with Kieran, to continue the partnership that had defined both their lives. At her funeral, Matthew read from a letter she had written to be opened after her death. In it, she thanked her children for the joy they had brought her, expressed pride in the people they had become, and urged them to always value family and love and the bonds that tie people together. But the last paragraph was about Kieran, about the cowboy who had changed her life with simple acts of kindness. "I came to Watsonville alone and afraid, with nothing but a trunk and a dream," she had written. "I found love and family and a life beyond anything I could have imagined. I found my home, my purpose, my reason for being. And it all started with a man who saw someone in need and chose to help, asking nothing in return. That is who Kieran was. That is who he remained for all the years we had together. And that is the legacy I hope we leave. That kindness matters, that love endures, and that the storms we weather together make us stronger than we ever could be alone." The Double R Ranch continued to thrive under Matthew's management, passing eventually to his children and grandchildren, generation after generation carrying on the work that Kieran and Zara had started. The house they built still stands, lovingly maintained and filled with the descendants of their love. The community they helped nurture in Watsonville grew into a thriving town, then a small city, always remembering the people who had helped shape it in its early days. And somewhere in the family archives, carefully preserved, is the quilt from that bed where a cowboy and a seamstress shared a room during a storm that would not quit, where he slept on the floor until she asked him not to, where a love story began that would span decades and touch hundreds of lives, and create a legacy that endures to this day. It is faded now, worn soft with age, but it remains a tangible reminder of where it all started, with kindness, with respect, with a simple act of consideration that grew into something extraordinary. That is the story of Zara Connelly and Kieran Turner, two ordinary people who built an extraordinary life together, who loved deeply and truly and forever, who weathered every storm that came their way and emerged stronger on the other side. Their story is not unique in its elements. There have been countless love stories throughout history, but it was unique in the particular way these two people chose each other, honored each other, and built something that would outlast them both. It is a story worth remembering, worth telling, worth passing down through the generations as a reminder of what love can be when it is grounded in respect and partnership and unwavering commitment. It is a story that started with a storm and a single room and one bed, and ended with a legacy of love that spans more than a century. It is, quite simply, a story of two people who found each other at exactly the right moment and chose to build something beautiful together, one day at a time, one choice at a time, until they had created a love that would truly never die.